How's it going, Facebook? Welcome back to another fabulous Friday with the legend, Mr. Mike Ferry. Today, as you already know, we're going to talk about how you can sell your listings fast, which is obviously critical in all markets, but gets even more critical in markets like we're in today. Before we dive in, I have a quick story that, Mike, I didn't tell you I was going to tell you this, but if you remember, about a year ago, you sent me an email. I was honored to receive it. And you said, hey, look, I'm going to do these short little videos about with people like you that have been with me for a while to talk about what they've learned working with Mike Ferry and bullet out the 10 points. And I was thinking about this last night as we were getting ready for the presentation today. And my number 1 or 2 or 3 was I wrote down, I know that the market never controls my business, only I control my business. And that was one of the top things that I learned working with you. And I was fortunate to get in when it was really bad. But I say that because I think it's a great intro to where we're at today and people being concerned about the market changing and what that means. What I know it means is if you follow someone like Mike that has over 40 years proven track record to work in all markets, then you'll realize the market doesn't change. You just change the things you do in changing markets. With that said, welcome, Mike Ferry.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Kevin. Nice to have all of you folks back again. Okay. It's an interesting time for us because, as Sam mentioned, I've had the good fortune, I think, of lasting, it's now 44 years in this wonderful, wild, crazy, exciting, productive world called real estate. And it's interesting because I've seen some of the best times. I've seen much of the worst times. We all know that real estate is a cyclical business, okay? Every 4 to 6 years, depending on the length of time, it's either going up, going flat, or going down. We are obviously now in most of the country in a flat and or declining market period. And it's not a big secret. It started actually probably last May or June of 2018. There's 3 factors that I want all of our great listeners to be aware of. Number 1, we know the market is declining when inventory is going up. Last month in the city of Las Vegas, where we are headquartered, 5,200 listings were taken in 30 days. That is almost a record number of listings taken. With that being said, the second factor we have to look at is that will then cause prices to decline. Watch, it's a simple cause and effect thing. It's not a major economic change in our mindset. If there is excessive inventory, there's going to be less buyers, which drive prices down. And then third, of course, we're seeing a decline of any place from 7 to 10 up to 20 to 22% nationwide of the actual number of transactions being done. And it's just called the facts of life. Now, the good news is for all of our listeners, Sam and Kevin, that are real good active agents, this is your time, okay? Because, see, the good agents recognize what Sam said. The economy does not control a good agent's productivity and income. The economy controls an agent who's not prepared, doesn't have the skills, or isn't really any good at this business, okay? The one thing we can hope for, and I say this not to be negative, is we hope that, of course, we have as big a decline in the number of agents that are active as we have the number of transactions being done, so the per person productivity can increase. Okay, we're obviously overpricing listings in a downward trending market. And I wrote down a question, why do we do this? And I wrote down first, it's generally because the agent is not aware of the market conditions. Folks, look at the number of listings in your market, called market stats. Look at the number of listings coming on each month. Look at the number of sales each month. Look at the imbalance of the two. Look at the number of closings. Look at how your inventory is growing. See, if you're not understanding the basics of what we do, which is understanding market conditions, we take overpriced listings. I wrote down second, we take overpriced listings because we get a little desperate. It's called human nature, nothing to be embarrassed about. It happens all the time. We need a listing more than the seller needs to sell it. That is all the signs of a good old-fashioned disaster. When the agent, their need is bigger than the seller's need, we have problems. I wrote down third, egos get in the way. We take a listing 5, 10, 15% overpriced, and we actually believe we're magical. We can get it sold. Okay. I think that's why medical marijuana is so popular today. Okay. That ego does get in the way. But then fourth reason we take them overpriced is we're trying to beat out the competition. That's a dangerous area for an agent to play in. Okay. Because see, when bidding wars start on listings, just like when bidding wars on cutting commissions are in effect, nobody wins. Buyers, sellers, brokers, agents, nobody wins.
You know, Mike, on that topic, this always comes up, and I'm always thinking about you in the conversation. I think that in the ego of it, as an agent, I'll take an overpriced listing because I want to beat the competition. My question for I know you know the answer, but my question for everyone that's listening is, who's actually laughing, right? The agent that you beat out?
Yes.
Or you? And a good, smart, productive agent is laughing at the person that took an overpriced listing that's not going to sell. So when you're trying to beat the competition by taking an overpriced listing, all you're doing is making it easier for them to sell circles around you. And the whole time, you're the one that's kind of being laughed at.
5 minutes before our car stalled this morning, this particular webinar, I was communicating with one of our clients who is up in Northern California. And Kevin, he said to me that he has been following one company in town that overprices listings. And since January, he's taken 5 expireds that this company had, all 5 have sold. So, he's laughing all the way to the bank, which is what we're trying to do here. A report came out about 3 or 4 days ago stating that 39 of the 50 largest cities in the U.S. had record number of price reductions take place through their MLS in the month of January. Las Vegas, Seattle, San Jose, Phoenix, and I've forgotten the 5th. Mostly West Coast. West Coast is going to be more overprice conscious than Midwest because of the traditions of the real estate market. So I'm going to read to everybody, so excuse me for reading, but I want to read to you a paragraph that I think is important. I wrote, the challenge we face in a transitioning market while working with great agents like these folks today is getting you to recognize the conditions of the market we have today versus 3 to 5 years ago. Then remaining positive, then remaining mentally strong, and taking positive steps to get your listing sold and keep your business growing. The following thoughts I want to share can help you in terms of activities and strategies, both of those strategies also, to get your listing sold. Now, I wrote that paragraph, Sam, in March of 2006. I could have written it today. Because
totally.
That just shows how cyclical the market is. So I've got a report here, and I think I have 45 different thoughts for agents to use in getting price reductions. We're going to cover as many as we can cover in the time we have this morning. Number 1 is so obvious that I don't understand why we don't do it, but I'll just read it to you the way I wrote it. If you price it right the day you take the listing, you don't have to worry about price reductions later in the term of the listing. Meaning that if you're pricing a property 1, 2, 3% overpriced, it's called normal. If you're pricing it today 5, 7, 10% over, it's abnormal, and you're going to run into problems. So if you really are going to be honest with the seller, and that's the hard part, okay? You have one listing presentation for the month. How honest can you be? And I don't mean to say that you're dishonest, but if you have 5 listing presentations in a month, you can be a lot more honest than if you have only 1. So it's not always going to be dictated, the price, on your knowledge of the market. It could be dictating the price based on your activity in the market. So if you're an inactive agent, now don't get mad. If you're taking less than 1 listing a week, you're not active, because there is a number of transactions available every week. So the pricing is the issue. I'm honest with sellers if I'm taking and going on continuous listing presentations. So price it right the day you take the listing. Be totally honest with the seller, which means you're being honest with yourself, which means, as Sam said, if you walk away, it's okay. All right. Second thought I wrote down. If they're insisting upon a price that is unrealistic, smile, shake their hand, and leave as quickly as possible. Okay? It's hard because, again, if you're going on, some of the agents we work with are going on 15 to 20 listing presentations a month, and they're taking 80% of those at fair market value. If you're going on one a month, it's hard to smile, shake their hand, and walk away, and then not go outside and start crying because you're losing a potential deal. So one of the best ways to deal with an overpriced listing is, believe it or not, walk away, because then you don't have the burden and the guilt of that listing afterwards. Third thing I wrote down, which I'm sure all of you do, put a price reduction form in your pre-listing package, okay? Last week we talked, Sam and Kevin, pre-listing package. We have, obviously list of references. We have all of our disclosure statements. We have a contract filled out. We have the net sheet. We have obviously a CMA with suggested price. We have a copy of our sales plan. It's a strong, non-ego-based package that is delivered to the seller 24 hours prior to your presentation. Now we include a price reduction form. When they look at it, it says price reduction form. Watch, even the people that aren't smart can figure out what those words mean. So by putting it in your pre-listing package, they're getting used to seeing a document that you may be having to work with in the very near future, okay? Now, the fourth thought I wrote down is probably the most important. Buyers, go ahead, please.
I have a quick question for you. So you mentioned a lot of really great things, and I wanted to ask you something before we moved on, because there's a lot of great info here. I think what you're talking about real quick, when you said walk away if they don't agree with your price, that really comes down to confidence. Having confidence to be able to walk away because you've got other transactions, because you've got other business, and you know that you're not relying on this one particular listing to save your career, if you will, right? So this is really important to understand that. So that comes back down to doing the things every day that's going to get you to that level of confidence where you can walk away, right? But here's one thing I want to ask you, because I think this is really interesting, and I think there's a lot of differing opinions on what you're saying. And I don't want to challenge what you're saying, but I want to ask you, because I know that people are thinking, if I'm going to walk away from a listing, so you mentioned include a price reduction clause in the agreement, right?
Correct.
So if somebody has a certain expectation of price in their mind in terms of a seller, right? Here's what I think some people might be thinking. Why not just take that listing and post your sign and include the price reduction clause, regardless of where the price may be, and then and at least have the opportunity to be able to sell that property, versus if I walk away and give the listing to somebody else, now they're going to have the opportunity, and they're going to be in front of that seller, and they're going to be advising that seller potentially to reduce the price and then potentially get the sale. So I'm not saying one way is right or the other. I just think that some people may be thinking that, and I'd love to hear your opinion.
First of all, one of the things that I really like both with Sam and Kevin, for all of our listeners, is I like it when you challenge the thoughts. That's important, okay? And of course, as Sam said earlier, the diversity of thoughts on what we should do to succeed in real estate, they're so diverse it doesn't make sense. If you go to IBM, there's one sales process. Xerox has one sales process. Marriott has one sales process. Real estate has 1,000. And so I think what you're saying is really important. So here's the thought. I tell our agents the following. Kevin, you'll get a kick out of this. If you challenge what I said a minute ago, this will challenge all of our thinkers. I tell agents, when you take an overpriced listing, the branding that you've done to make yourself look good is destroyed within 14 days of the listing being taken, because the sign in the front yard becomes negative advertising. So I tell agents all the time, when you have a sign up for more than 30 days and it's not sold, take the sign down, because what you're promoting to the entire neighborhood is this is a lousy agent who cannot get this home sold.
Wow.
Okay. And so we have several thousand good coaching clients like Sam. And a lot of our agents will say to me, oh my gosh, Mike, it's 29 days. I either got to get the price down or I got to take my sign down. I go, good. Okay. So Kevin, I agree with you. Depending on the level of activity, they're going to take listings overpriced, and hopefully with the price reduction strategy, they're going to work the price down. But see here, and I'm going to talk about this if we have enough time today, if not next week, a little later in our presentation. When you go for a price reduction, you always go for the maximum, where most agents go for the minimum. You know, if the price is $695 and it should be $635, to go in and ask for $1,000 price reduction, it's not stupid, it's idiotic stupid, dumb, ignorant, pathetic, unprofessional, unethical, and you're going to lose money. Ask for the biggest you can get, because the worst they can do is counter by giving you something a little less than what you asked for. Please.
Would you mind sharing the script on that when you're talking to the seller? Just if you would mind sharing the script, that'd be great.
Good. Let me, if I may, I'm just going to turn ahead for a second in my notes, because what I have here, you're going to love this. I have 45 points, and we have 30 minutes. We'll cover about 5 or 6. And then, in fact, Sam, what we might want to do is at some point in our relationship together, the three of us and your listeners, maybe if we can figure out how to get it to them, we could give them a copy of this entire report, which I'm willing to do.
Why don't we tell them to just, can we email it to them if they put their email in the comment threads?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, like, we're obviously not going to get through this 40. So put your email right here in the comments, and someone on the team, either on Mike's side or our side, will send you the entire list of 40 so that you can have it, review it, share with your teams, and etc.
So look, this is point 39. So I'm moving ahead. I'm going to come back to where we were. At the end of 60 days, I tell an agent, if listings are overpriced, go ahead and pre-qualify the seller once again for motivation. I mean, go right back to the pre-qualifying process, because remember, as the property sits on the market, they could become extremely discouraged. Their whole thought process could change. They may even change their mind and not tell you, and they may have decided they really don't want to sell until the market recovers. You know, that means the motivation wasn't really there. So you go back with this kind of a script, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, okay? I'm going to need one of the 4 things to happen to get this property sold. First, an extension of the listing to the full 6 months, in hopes the economy recovers during that time so we can get you your price. Or second, a lower price, whether it be 5 or 10%, and that in this case calculates to and give them the dollar amount. Third, I want you to consider paying, instead of a 6% commission, maybe 8%, and I offer a big commission to an agent to actually sell your property. I'll keep 3, we'll pay 5. Okay? I want to create an incentive. Or fourth, if nothing that I'm saying makes sense to you, I should consider giving the listing back because it's not good for you or me. Which of these 4 would you consider? So, Kev, that type of an approach. Now, some of our listeners will say, I could never do that. That's too strong. You've got a seller that is relying on you to get their home sold. I don't want a doctor to say, you know, Mike, maybe you have cancer, maybe you don't, maybe you have a heart problem. I want a doctor to tell me that. I mean, as I told Sam, Kevin, a couple of months ago, they cut 1/3 of this ear off. I had cancer. So this ear is a 7-year-old ear. This ear is a 73-year-old ear. I mean, it's that much smaller. The doctor said to me, you have cancer. We're going to cut 1/3 ear off. I said, when? He said, today. I said, let's go. Well, maybe we can get your price, and maybe we can get your, it doesn't work. Sam, please.
I was just about to say, when you said, well, I know now agents are going to tell me, well, I can't talk like that. That's not me. I can't say that. The interesting thing for me, and I know that you'll appreciate this, Mike, is every time I'm coaching an agent to use certain parts of the scripts, the parts that to me are the most powerful in the conversation are the parts that the agents say, I can't say, that's not me. And my answer to that is exactly. That's why the powerful agents that take all the business, because they're willing to have the uncomfortable conversations that the average agent's not willing to have. So if you're not willing to have the uncomfortable conversations and tell a seller, option 5 is I give you back your listing, then all they're hearing is commission breath. But the moment you say that, you're speaking with authority, you're speaking with confidence, and that's ultimately what the seller wants to follow.
This is going to be a strange thought for some of our listeners. The stronger the agent, the more controversial people will see you to be. And the more controversial you are, the stronger you are, as Kevin mentioned in your presentation style. You can't get price reductions on listings, sitting there playing patty cake with the seller. You got to tell them the truth. So I'll share another thought. If the buyers have multiple choices, which they do, okay, condition also then becomes a critical process in the pricing situation. Watch, 2017, if we listed a property 15, 20% over price, we had multiple offers, and the house could be a teardown, okay? Condition didn't make any difference from 2013 to 2018. Condition today affects pricing, okay? Sabrina and I were up in Pebble Beach, as I said to Kevin earlier this week, and we drove around, looked at a couple of properties, and it was so interesting. You're looking at a property that's $9 million, and it's a teardown, okay? Condition is not a factor. Then it's all location. So condition, location become factors in pricing, okay? The next thing I wrote down, which we talked about last week a lot, if you want to really be a great listing agent in pricing, pre-qualify 100%, no exceptions. We talked about it last week. We won't have to spend a lot of time on it this week. They can go back and watch last week's again. Okay, Jack Welch, chairman of GE for so many years and considered by many to be the most successful leader of any American industry in history. If you read his books, Sam, he has a great thought for all of us on pricing. And he says that all the companies in GE, and I think he was controlling about 275 separate corporations, okay, were under his control. Every corporation, no matter what the product or service was, had to be number 1 or number 2 in the market they were involved in. And if they couldn't be number 1 or number 2, he either sold the company, closed it down, or helped them become number 1 or number 2. So here's Mike's thought, okay? Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you've got to be number 1 or number 2 in your market in terms of pricing versus the competition. And if we want to be number 1, we probably have to be at least 5% below the competition. Will you consider dropping your price to be the number 1 property on the market? It's a tough question to ask, okay? And thank you, Kevin and Sam, for shaking your heads yes on that, okay? But then you can come back and say to a seller, do you understand the market conditions and what it means in totally affecting the sale of your property? My sales style, which has been always incredibly unpopular, but I always say, I've lasted 44 years being unpopular, so something that we say must make sense. My sales style is ask questions, okay? My sales style, now again, some of our listeners aren't going to like this, it's not to build rapport with the seller, to be honest, to be upfront, to be truthful, okay? Tommy Hopkins, who I've had nothing but respect for virtually 50 years, out of Scottsdale, Arizona. Tommy used to say all the time, sellers have to like you, love you, and trust you. I like Tom a lot. I mean, he's a great guy, but I don't care if a seller likes me. I don't care if the doctor likes me. I don't care if the attorney likes me. I don't care if the pilot likes me. Get me to the destination. He said they have to like you. They have to love you. Oh, I don't think I want the seller to love me. That's not my issue. And what I want them to do is respect that I have the knowledge to get the job done. That's why, Kevin, I love what you said. The respect comes from the confidence I display when I'm sitting with the seller and talking to them face to face, okay? So do you understand what these market conditions and statistics mean and how they affect the sale of your property? It's a question. Now, the key to questions is always the same in selling. I'm not asking so I can listen and think of my next question. I'm asking so I can listen with the intent of doing something better for that customer, okay? So with that being said, on price reductions, strong, weekly, truthful, upfront communications between you and the seller regarding everything is critical. Weekly, Weekly, not Weakly. Okay, and I say that respectfully. Okay.
What if,
Go ahead, please, Kev.
can you just list out when you say reporting or updates, what are you including there? Like open houses, number of people, so on. What are some things that you're including in that report?
When you're calling your seller once a week, number of showings, number of calls you've had regarding showings, responses to showings, obviously. If you had any open houses, any marketing activity, what kind of responses you had. And the same, and this is for the three of us, a very normal thought process, with the number of showings we've had and no offers being written, it is telling us our property is overpriced. And being able to then say that. If you honestly call them every week, okay, every Friday, and report what's happened during the week, they aren't going to always be happy, but they're going to appreciate the honesty. And then when you do go in for the price reduction, you're changing the whole perception of what you're trying to accomplish. I did a survey about 15 years ago. I spent $75,000 and it was a waste of money, okay? I hired UCI, University of California, Irvine. You know that university, of course, Kevin. I hired the research department to survey 2,000 people in Orange County, California about real estate. There was 30 questions. One of the questions was, tell us about the level of professionalism you see among real estate people. Good, bad, indifferent was the answer. I think it was 96% bad. And of course, then the question was why? And the answer was because when we talk to a realtor once and sign a contract, we may not hear from them ever again. Ever, until there's an offer on the property. I did some work with a great agent on the East Coast. 75, 80 deals a year is a great agent. She actually told me that when she lists a property, she never speaks to the seller until an offer comes in. Her average time in the market's 4.5 months. She discovered that some of the sellers forgot who she was. They didn't remember her name when she would call them back. So the communication is the basis of customer service, which is the basis of asking for a price reduction. So now here's one more thing. We're almost at 30 minutes. I wish we had 3 hours. So here's one more point, and then we'll continue with these points at whatever level or whatever time you guys want us to do it in the future. If the property has been shown to a motivated buyer, consider having your sellers write an offer to the buyer to see if they'd consider purchasing the home. It's what I call a reverse offer, okay? Kevin and Sam, in 2007, 2008, we had probably over 2,000 transactions that our customers did where the seller wrote the offer to the buyer. A motivated, qualified buyer came into the house with an agent. The agent wasn't able to close the buyer on the property. The agent had the listing, followed up with the buyer's agent and said, what is your buyer's interest? Well, I think they might have an interest. Fine. And then they would sit down with their seller and have them write an offer to the buyer to buy the house. We created 2,000 transactions that way.
That's really, really sharp.
Okay. And it's called a reverse offer. Why not? If you've got a listing that is reasonably well priced and you're not getting the offers you want, and you have a motivated buyer, write an offer from the seller to the buyer. So my time clock on the wall shows 29 minutes and 4 seconds, and we've been great the last 3 weeks trying to keep these under 30 minutes out of respect for all of your great members, Kevin and Sam. So anybody that gives an email address to you, Sam, we'll forward the entire report. Okay, now remember, I wrote the report in March of 2006. Let's see, 2016, 2000, that's what, 13 years ago. 85% of this report is still 100% applicable today, okay? So we would be honored to forward that to you, Sam, and to Kevin, and to your members. And Sam, thanks, and Kevin, for today. I enjoy these.
Man, this is so good, Mike. It's always a pleasure talking with you, sir.
Well, thank you, Kevin. Thanks for your support.
Mike, thanks for coming on. We've had crazy good engagement this Friday. A lot of people are putting their emails and hitting the like and love button. I think we really hit an important note that people want to know about. So maybe next week we can continue this conversation. And for those of us that are watching, if you want to know something from Mike yourself, post it on here. Help us guide the conversation, and we will put together different formats and different topics with us, Mike, and you to help you take your business to the next level. Thanks for.
Quick question. Would it be improper for me to give them my email address also?
No, not at all. Please do. I can post it. Go ahead.
It's really complicated. Mike.ferry@mikeferry.com.
That's hard.
It's a pure ego email address.
Well, you got it.
See you guys soon. Bye-bye.